Leena sat alone in a stark hospital waiting room, the sterile light casting pale shadows across her tired face. Clutched tightly in her hands was a small pouch, inside which rested her mother's old hairbrush and a folded note. The words on the page were simple, but they burned into her like fire. "Promise me you'll live freely." Her mother was gone, taken by cancer 2 weeks ago, and Leena had barely spoken since. That night, back in her dimly lit bedroom, she sat in front of her mirror, brushing her thick, cascading hair with mechanical slowness. Every stroke reminded her of the woman who once braided it with such love. The memory of her mother, fragile, bald, and crying as she lost the last of her hair, played over and over in her mind. The next morning, she walked into a quiet neighborhood salon. Priya, the stylist, greeted her with a warm smile that faltered when Leena made her request. "Are you sure?" she asked, looking at the long black strands. Leena nodded, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "That's why it has to go." The buzz of clippers filled the silence. As the first lock slid down her shoulder, tears welled up. Each pass stripped away not just hair, but years of pain, memories, and silence. She cried quietly, whispering, she used to braid it every morning. Priya paused, offered a comforting hand, and resumed. When it was over, Leena looked at herself in the mirror. Her scalp was bare, her eyes swollen, but her expression was clear. "This is me," she said softly. She didn't leave the house for 3 days. She needed time to adjust to her new self. When she finally ventured out to the grocery store, wrapped in a scarf, the world responded with curious eyes. Whispers followed her down aisles, and an old man at the checkout murmured, "Shame, such a pretty girl." She smiled politely but left quickly, heart heavy with the weight of judgment. Back at work, it wasn't much easier. Her coworkers stared. Her boss, Mira, approached awkwardly, asking, "What happened to your hair?" Leena replied calmly, "I shaved it. For my mom." Mira said nothing for a moment, then nodded with something that resembled respect. It wasn't until lunch in the break room that someone finally saw her. A shy intern named Kavya approached, eyes wide with sincerity. "I just wanted to say, you look powerful. My sister did the same after cancer. I think you're brave." Leena, touched, struggled to speak, and instead smiled with gratitude. That night, she opened her laptop and began writing. Her blog, titled The Last Strand, became her outlet, her space to process grief, healing, and the transformation of self. To her surprise, readers from across the world responded. Messages poured in from strangers sharing stories of their own losses, head shaves, and rebirths. Leena felt something stir inside her, a purpose. In the following weeks, her story reached more than just online readers. She was invited to speak at a small wellness event. Standing on stage, bald and radiant, she read her words aloud to an audience of women who cried with her, smiled with her, healed with her. And one morning, as sunlight crept across her bedroom wall, Leena stood before the mirror again. Her fingers traced the soft stubble growing in. She smiled, not out of vanity, but victory. "I kept the promise," she whispered, and behind her reflection, for just a moment, she could almost see her mother smiling too.